It's disorganized play. It's disorganized play. Today is the day where we recap what we did yesterday. Hey, hey, hey! That was a quick one. I felt like that was tight. I did not have a lot of confidence going into that one, but here we are. Welcome, everyone, to Disorganized Play, the DM preparation and recaperation show. I'm here to do the latter. On Tuesday, we did the former. Yesterday, wow, did we play a really great game of Dungeons & Dragons, everybody. That went better than I expected. So, for those of you who are not aware, not just tuning in for the first time, just watching this show for the first time, looking to get straight to the details of the brilliant GM advice that I dispense here, which you'll rapidly find out I don't ever get directly to, well, not ever, but I often, it's often intermingled with our actual play that we do on Wednesdays called the Iron Keep Chronicles. It is our D&D 5 campaign. We're currently playing some adventures from Tales from the Yawning Portal. We're about 2/3 of the way through White Plume Mountain, but there's plenty of intra-campaign drama and I wanted to say suspense, but intrigue, drama and intrigue happening within the game, which it should be. Like your version of the game should be tailored to your group, right? Don't ever just play something generic out of the box and not fiddle with it. All right, very good. So, thank you everyone for joining me. I really appreciate you being here. We're going to talk about a few things today. We're going to maybe recap the session in brief. I don't have a lot to say about it other than that it was fantastic. And then some of these topics today will integrate some of the observations that I have about yesterday's game. So, our topics: role-playing encounters that aren't on the paper. Schrodinger's reveals. Oh, well, you've heard of Schrodinger's clues. I hope you have. If you haven't, we'll talk about them in brief. And then finally, we'll talk about loose ends and umbrellas, which is not the album of, not the album title of an XTC album from the '80s. It is my way of kind of like corralling, all right, where are all the weird tidbits that we have been setting up? It's time to start paying things off, right? So that's what we're going to try and tackle today. The loose ends stuff may bleed over into Tuesday. Who knows? If you have questions about last night's game or what have you, feel free to fire them at me here in the chat. BSB Care points out, if you had money, you could hire Amy to write you a theme song. Just, we already know what that theme song is. It's called Level 3 DM. Yeah, I'll take it. All right, very good. So, before we, I believe Jordan Pridgeon is also in the chat. So, big ups to DJ Jordan Pridgeon for jumping in last night and really doing an excellent job on short notice and just being handed the character like literally 20 minutes before the game started. We sat down at the table. He's like, "Hey, how you doing?" "Good. How are you, Jordan?" "I was checking." "Great. Well, who am I playing tonight?" So a lot of what you saw last night on the stream was was due to the improvisational brilliance of Mr. Jordan Pridgeon. So big ups. On the other hand, I did deliberately craft a character for him that I thought he could like put his hooks into and get some juice out of. You know, sort of based on playing with in games with him before, especially like our Fiasco game, and also just thinking like, okay, what's a good character hook here? This isn't really, I guess this is sort of tangentially related to RP encounters that aren't on the paper, so maybe we'll kind of blend these two topics. So when I was sitting down to analyze the adventure last night, and looking at what I wanted to have happen and whatnot, you know, White Plume Mountain is very old school and very combat heavy. So there's a whole like section of the spur of the adventure that they went down that they ignored. That is not, that is just a combat encounter. It's like you go through this weird trap tunnel thing, and then you get attacked by this guard and this other wizard, and there's really no explanation of like why these people are living here or how they get in and out particularly easy or any of that. You know, there's no dungeon ecology to it, which that's like the hallmark of a White Plume Mountain style adventure. Is it's just a puzzle box. It doesn't make any sense outside of itself. It's a self-contained bottle. Shake it up, watch the little snowflakes spin around, enjoy, but don't try and like draw anything out of it, right? Don't break the glass. That's not a great fit for the type of campaign that I'm running. So when I was sitting down to prep the adventure last night, I was like, how do I get rid of some of these combat encounters that are just really combat encounters? It's monsters guarding treasure. And you know, if there's a piece of advice that I can pass on to you right off the top of the show that I want you to take home and take to heart right now as a DM, it's that treasure is great, information is more important. So if you have an encounter where a monster is guarding something and then they just hand it out, that's fine. That's the way the kind of the press the button kind of Skinner box style of psychology of the game operates for D&D. But I would argue that you need to focus on how do I give the players more information and share information and pull them into mysteries and drama and conflict and suspense. And likewise, how do I help them solve the mysteries and the drama and the conflict and suspense? And sometimes last night we were more successful at that than others. But just to put a pin on this, yes, at the very end of the night we had a giant guardian creature that was literally guarding a box, and there was a fight, and you got a bunch of baubles out of it, right? Okay. And yeah, they got cool stuff. They don't know that. But they got cool stuff, and they were excited to get, oh, okay, there's this trident, whoa, what is this? And, you know, but what was the important thing? The important thing was that there was this golden apple, which was really, you know, the plot hook MacGuffin that allowed them to spring Avril back out of getting entrapped in the book, right? So that's, whoa, all right. I don't even know how much I have to spend here. How about, let's just do 1,000. So that's illustrates my point that having an encounter which is the, like, atomic level of encounter for Dungeons & Dragons. A monster is guarding something, you fight it, defeat it, and get it, right? Orc and Pie is what it is. Having that encounter is fine, it's a fundamental unit, but defeat monster, get information is far more something you really need to focus on. That's your job as the DM, is to disseminate information. So whenever you're sitting down looking at an adventure, ask yourself, okay, well, how does this illuminate the plot in some way? And also, how much time and resources is this going to take, and is that appropriate, right? So I looked at the spur that was like, okay, these monsters are guarding, I don't even know, it's like really her spell book and a few thousand gold pieces. It's not much of a reward. How much time is that going to take? What's it worth it? How can I swap this out for a role-playing encounter that will get the players engaged in the game in a different way, or at least in a way that's more satisfying? So that's important. Did I get killed in the dungeon delve, you guys? Wow. I'm gonna be bad. I'm gonna feel bad if I lost 1,000 magic points. So and I lost my train of thought. um, I wanted to plug in a different role playing encounter. It was a very open ended kind of situation because I was going to just scrap one whole piece of the dungeon and go, well, there's something here. What is it? Right? And there were so many possibilities ahead of me that I kind of set all of that stuff aside. And I said, all right, let's make sure that Jordan has an interesting character to play, right? So I sat down and I came up with this concept of like, okay, I really love the idea. Like everybody starts their adventuring campaign as like, oh, he's a strapping young 19-year-old, apprentice to the wizard who's going off to seek his own fortune and glory. Da da da. And everybody, there's a huge focus on the charm of youth and where it goes, and that's not surprising, right? Like the arc of Dungeons and Dragons is neophytes begin their journey into the realm of heroes and assume competence and cloak themselves in glory, right? That's the typical journey of Dungeons and Dragons. Well, we were playing a one shot with that character last night, and I love the idea of plugging in a character who's now on the back end of that arc, who's maybe died or gone through some sort of trauma, or in this case been imprisoned and now is like aged out of his prime and has been denied the riches and the accolades that he thought were coming to him. Don't read anything into this, guys. Everything's great over here. Everything's fine. Being an actor in Hollywood is not at all toxic to your ego. Don't worry about it. So, but I also when I was playing a D&D campaign a long time ago before I moved to Los Angeles, and I loved the idea, like we had to start with like a 9th level character, and I was like, well, what if this guy was like 10th or 11th level, but he'd been killed and he'd lost a level, or he'd been level drained, so he had a taste of greater power, but now he's dropped back. Oh yeah, I'm dropping frames. Sorry. What? There? Now it's back. Let me turn one of my computers off. Oh, did that do it? Did that bring it back? Okay. Alright. It looks better now. Like I had some windows open on my other machine that was eating some bandwidth apparently. I don't know, I turned it off. Alright. So, So I love this concept of sort of a fall from grace. Not even a fall from grace, just like you're a hero on the down and outs. You're on the backside of your power. You've had the opportunity to go someplace interesting and didn't. So I ended up. The short version of this is that I ended up putting more time into working on Jordan's character than I did into prepping an alternate role-playing encounter. Like I had a page of backstory for him, and I had the alternate stats for his character, and that all took work to do. And for the alternate role-playing encounter, I had a post-it note, right, with a couple bullets on it. Now, why is all this important? because this all ties into role-playing encounters that aren't on the paper. So I wanted to have some solid, interesting RP that happened in this session, right? And I was trying to figure out a way to sort of like cold open this thing. Like there was the door with the two angels, and maybe they go talk to those angels. Even the Kelpies encounter was supposed to be a combat encounter, but that became more of a role-playing encounter, right? But that was on the paper. Like I knew there were Kelpies in there, and I knew that I wanted to change that into an RP encounter with TAC. So I took that tweak. That was easy. But the RP encounter that was not on the paper was the RP encounter where we introduced Sir Eldrick, right? And then not only that, but Sir Eldrick continues to have role-playing opportunities with the rest of the party as they adventure. And I think this is one of those things that I certainly am guilty of, quick hand-waving, oh, I forgot about it, let's just get over this. And it's a joke in like the original or one of the Gamers movies is like, oh, you seem trustworthy, join us. Boom, after the wizard has been murdered and suddenly this new strange wizard shows up, but everybody knows it's played by the same guy. And so they're like, let's go. And I'm certainly guilty of like wanting to just get the game going. Let's not have a big RP scene where you have to explain who you are and why everybody trusts everybody, and let's just pull it together and move forward with the plot, right? Well, those moments of character introduction and also conflicting moments of character motivation are RP encounters that aren't on the paper, right? And you have to account for those or accommodate those. Either you have to account for them ahead of time when you're planning your session, or you have to accommodate them when they crop up organically in the course of the adventure, right? So the two ways to illustrate that are, at the beginning of the session, I knew I had to give him a backstory and like how he got in there. Like I knew I had to explain somehow like how this guy shows up and how Avril disappears. So I accounted for that, right? There's the book, and somehow he came out of the book and she went into the book. I wasn't even really 100% sure how that happened, but I knew that it probably wasn't going to matter. I'd be able to kind of jump cut into that, right? So that's one thing. So I had that prepped on the front end, that I knew there was going to be kind of like a who are you, what's going on, that type of scene. I knew that was going to be there. I guess I did prep for that in that I gave him a rich enough backstory that he didn't have to just make up garbage, carte blanche, and just be hanging there like, I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm saying I don't care if I don't know if it's canonical to your world. I will point out one sort of a clever little trick here that I want to share with you, which is I gave him a faulty memory, right? So if he was searching for something or wasn't sure about a fact, it was because his character was a little, wasn't 100%. And that makes it much easier for a player to dive in and be at home fabricating things, because if it's something that the dungeon master has to correct and the rest of the players go, what is he talking about? You can always go, well, that's the way he remembers it. So that's just a little, that slight adjustment of giving him an unreliable memory. It's a cheap trick, but it really works well, right? So that was an RP encounter that we accounted for ahead of time. You have to accommodate them when they pop up, and that gets into this whole, like, the whole debate that Amy's character is having with the rest of the party, which is, like, these weird infernal voices seem to be making her dark offers, and she's inclined to follow the bargain and see if she can get the better of it, and they're like, you will never do, they don't trust her to do that, right? So that's a different part of it to consider, is that you have to let the players kind of like let that stuff play out, because that's them playing their characters. And so sometimes that means you just sit back and watch them argue. Now, if you go back and pay attention, there are some tools to pacing that I deployed to keep those things concise and keep them from dragging on too long. Because this is it's an argument that can't it's an argument that can't be resolved at this point, right? There's no winning scenario for either side. There's no win-win scenario for either side. So that means one side has to kind of like pummel the other until they just acquiesce. And largely it's been Tack pummels the rest of the party and reassures them, it's going to be okay, it's going to be fine, this is just something I have to do. And they go, all right, okay. But it's, you know, it's coming to a head. So in order to, when you recognize that an argument isn't something that's going to be won, then you have to look for opportunities to divert, redirect, press the pause button on this discussion and point out, oh, there's something that we're all unified about that we have to move on. Or alternately, as you may have seen last night, you just make the problem go away. So they're having this huge argument while the Kelpies are kind of like watching, and then finally at some point the Kelpies are like, hey, we've got time. You need us, let us know. And they just left, right? Okay, well now the situation is resolved. They're not blocking the path forward. They're not, you know, continuing to throw at temptation. The situation, not resolved, but it's got a lid on it, right? So it's not easy to do as the DM to sit back and just watch and let this thing play out. And I have ideas about ways that it could be solved, but like that all has to be introduced through different scenarios, right? I can't. It's hard as the DM to argue on one side or the other, depending upon the situation. In this particular situation, it's like there's the way one character feels, and there's the way the rest of the party feels, and you can't change those feelings without introducing some new circumstance, some new details, some new insight that they arrive at. Because where they're at right now is just clonking at loggerheads. Take it off the front burner, as Farquaad says. Yes. There was something that I wanted to share too. Emperor Riptide points out that sometimes when we just like hand wave the intros, it's because we've got so much stuff prepared and we really just want to get everything moving along, right? Because you only got 3 hours to play. And as BSB Care points out, especially after there's like been a PC death and you just want to get the game, get back into the plot or whatever, yeah. So those are RP encounters that aren't on the paper. Those are things that come up that I don't have, that aren't in the book, aren't a structured encounter. They're not what I would call a third-party encounter, right? Where you meet a merchant or a sage or 3 kobolds or whatever it is, an NPC who approaches the party with some sort of need, argument, riddle, whatever, you know, offer, whatever it is, right? These are RP encounters that come about within the party. They're intra-party RP encounters. I thought it worked out well. So, just to move along here, and Griffin points out that most PCs suffer from short attention span, so redirecting can really do the trick. Like, the easiest thing you can do is like, uh-oh, you hear a noise, roll for initiative. End of discussion. Hopefully, if an argument's really heated, you'll see points of view in that argument kind of like get carried out in a combat, so be careful of deploying that trick, because sometimes what you'll end up happening is you'll have a character like, well, I'm not healing you. You don't believe in our gods. Why should I heal you? That's problematic. So, but the number one trick you have at hand is definitely like, hey, everybody, roll for initiative. You hear a growling. 2 guys with guns burst through the door. It's not a great trick, but it's well, I mean, it can be a great trick, but it's a little bit of a cheap trick. It works 95% of the time. Be careful of, you know, too many. I'm finding as my DM career progresses that combat is something that I want to save as a special treat and not something that I want to just grind. And early in my DMing career, that was definitely like, oh, what's this cool fight? And look at this cool monster. And oh, look at this thing. Not realizing, like, you're eating a ton of time when you could be developing the story. Right? Shimmickson says, it was nice that Jordan provided a different perspective with his character. Less attachment, more paladin. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure at some point I've done the you hear something. That, yeah, I definitely did that. But it was a place that they needed to go, and they needed to get, like, let's get to it. Or I'm watching the clock, and the argument is stalled out. If I know that there's something nearby that's going to cause them a problem, then let's get into it. I guess my advice is be careful of dropping that trick when you don't have a reason for those people to show up. When you're just doing it in order to purely be a diversion, and you're hoping to like backfill some reasoning on what's happening. When it truly is just sort of this random, not obtuse, but this random. Oh, what's the word that I'm looking for? When it's it's deliberately to cover up the problem rather than a product of circumstance. So yeah, perception also works. Like that's easy. Like that's an easy way. Have them make a perception check. Oh, you hear something. It's still a similar situation where there better be more to that story of what they hear or what they smell than just make a roll. Because you can get yourself in trouble that way. All right. So Schrodinger's reveals, some of this stuff works in tandem with chat, with all of you in the audience there, and some of the stuff is stuff that I baked in. So Schrodinger's reveals. This was a fun. These were a couple things that really paid off last night that I thought were exciting and dramatic and interesting and really provided a twist to the game that no one at the table or necessarily even in the audience knew what was coming forward. And so a couple of these things. Basically, if you're unfamiliar with Schrodinger's clues, the idea behind a Schrodinger's clue is that you introduced some sort of element, some sort of intriguing element into the game without necessarily having a defined idea of what the full specific meaning of it is, right? So you might have a small orb that has a series of runes scribed around the edge of it, and it seems like the whole thing twists and moves almost like a little puzzle, right? Well, they could dink around with it for a while and maybe not gain more information, but maybe they find out like slowly, oh, it's of draconic origin. And, oh, a lot of these runes, it turns out, like they see them around and they realize, oh, these are draconic runes for the different elements. And they realize, oh, this thing, maybe eventually they realize, oh, this is the thing that is used to enhance a dragon's breath weapon, and now it has a specific meaning. You can attune it, you feed it to the dragon, and their breath weapon gains extra damage dice or whatever it is, right? So now it's gone from being this weird amorphous, like, oh, it's this little strange egg that spins and has these unknown things on it, to I fully understand how to use this, how to deploy it, who to sell it to, etc., 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 right? So that's fine. That's what Schrodinger's clues are, and you can use these in any number of ways to kind of build this what I like to think of islands of meaning that eventually connect together to form your plot and carry you across the bridge of the adventure, right? Those are Schrodinger's clues. What I mean by Schrodinger's reveals are things that are buried in the characters that suddenly come up and provide new light and new insight on a previous situation that is defined, or that the players know something about, but don't know the full story of, right? So in this case, Schrodinger's clue. One of the Schrodinger's clues that we have out there is this whole Gingy the Poisoner person. Like, who is this NPC? What's this entity all about? It seems malicious. Has been involved in some pretty shady stuff, but the party cut a bargain with him, etc., 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 etc. Right? That's all fine. Well, the Schrodinger's reveal that was buried in here is that I plugged that person in as a former adventuring compatriot of Sir Eldrick, right? Well, now, Jordan, as the player, didn't know that. And none of the other players had access to that backstory, but that was like a buried, it was a buried piece of information. Very important. I mean, not important in terms of, let me scale that back. Is it meaningful? Marginally, right? It's nice to know where he came from. Maybe that gives you a lead to go like track down more information about him, etc. Is it dramatic? Oh, it's wildly dramatic. Great moment, like it spawned a great scene of role playing. It completely freaked out the rest of the table, right? So, it's a Schrodinger's reveal. It's specific information that's attached to something sort of buried, and then when the players observe it, all of a sudden it illuminates some of the other Schrodinger's clues that they have out there, right? So it provides information. It's the reverse of a Schrodinger's clue. It's not something that's amorphous that you have to investigate further in order to get further insight about. It's something that's very specific but hidden, and when it's revealed, it provides a ton of more insight about a bunch of things that are amorphous, right? Yeah, it was very much like a record scratch moment. Like, and if you go back and watch the VOD, you'll see it because he starts off like, "Oh, I miss my compatriots, Ronaldo," and everybody's like, "Okay, whatever." The old man's rambling again, and "Oh, I wonder whatever happened to Gingy," or whatever actually he said, right? And that's when everybody at the table was like, "What?" And in fact, at the end of the session, they didn't even remember that he had mentioned Ronaldo at all. It was like, who cares about the other two adventurers? Like, what? You were with an elf named Gingy? So, so that was one of Schrodinger's reveals. The other one was this whole idea that I played off of the fact that he has this faulty memory, right? And as we got to it, chat unlocked his true nature. Now, this was a Schrodinger's reveal because the tease out there for chat was Sir Eldrick's true nature is revealed, and there's an ambiguous meaning attached to that, right? It's unclear what that means. You would be perfectly within your rights to expect that what that means is his true nature is he's a vampire or whatever. He's a traitor to the party, and he's going to go after them and start a combat. And that's kind of how the whole evening ends. Is they have to put down the madman or whatever, the evil imposter, the doppelganger, or what have you, right? So that would be a very clear interpretation of his true nature is revealed. I thought that was a little on the nose, obviously, or I wouldn't have set it up that way. But it was deliberately put to chat as reveals his true nature, as something ambiguous, right? Mr. Troy D, thanks for subbing up for 7 months in a row. You get to provide a reroll to somebody in either tonight's game of Never Tell Me the Odds or tomorrow night's game of the new wild cards, the new Wild West Savage Worlds game. That's that DJ Jordan Caves Callahan is starting up tomorrow. So keep that in mind. Make sure you tell our illustrious producer or whoever's running the boards that night what's up. What is up? So the Schrodinger's reveal in this case turned out to be like, oh, he remembers that he has this power to become a werebear. So that's relatively cool. I thought that was a relatively cool reveal. And it's a piece of specific information that you have buried that has potentially like explosively dramatic outcomes. Is it a super clever idea? No, but that type of information allowed me to embed a role-playing encounter in here that wasn't scheduled, it wasn't on the paper, it wasn't, it was a payoff that was available that I didn't know whether it was going to pay off in either cases. But when it does, hugely satisfying, really illuminates the game in a different, refreshing way and makes everybody feel like I understand more, right? This whole thing that I preach about, like, your job as the DM is to share information and to figure out ways to convey information, that to drop hooks and mystery and intrigue and pull the players into the mystery and then let them unspool it. Like, the important part of that whole process is let them unspool it. The players want to feel like they've figured it out and they've earned the solution. But they've come up with the solution, they've done the right steps to put the pieces together, they've come up with a solution, and they've solved it properly. And that's why having one predetermined outcome that you know is the one true correct answer can lead you to folly, where the party goes off and comes up with a different answer that is 100% completely plausible, and then because they quote-unquote didn't do it right, you know, the way that you anticipated, they're wildly, heinously wrong. Occasionally that technique can be deployed to offer the party a setback and then, like, get them to reset and get back on track. But more often than not, when that situation arises, you will have players just stare at you and be like, how are we supposed to know that? It's tough. Was one of them a werebear? I don't think one of the sorority sisters was a werebear. I think she was a different type of... I think she was a were-rat. Maybe I'm wrong. She didn't use any of her werebear powers, so I do have a crush on werebears. I'm not gonna lie about it. Like, I always thought it was great. Like, that idea. I remember reading the monster manual, the old AD&D monster manual. It was like, these are rangers. They're the only neutral good lycanthropes out there in the world. Like, okay, well, there's this one special strain that you can encounter, but they lead these solitary lives out in the midst of nowhere, doing their thing, pursuing their causes, and they eschew civilization and, you know, the company of huge numbers of people and whatnot. I think it's a really cool idea, and that's why it keeps coming up. So, yeah, did she turn into Werebear at the dance-off? That maybe. Oh, okay. All right. Very good. Yes, James V is right. That's because they're neutral good, not intrinsically evil. So, all right. We got like 15 minutes or so here. So those are a couple things. Let's just talk about some loose ends. Maybe I should be writing this down, but I don't know that I'm going to. Loose ends and umbrellas. So let's just take stock of where we are at this point in the adventure. I don't know if I was surprised or disappointed that they did not manage to collapse the bubble underneath it, you know, in the boiling hot water. But that could have been a TPK. I'm just reflecting on last night's events. So, we've gone through 2/3 of the spurs of White Plume Mountain, right? If you look at the adventure, there's a very marginal kind of introductory passageway, and then there's these three spurs that they can go down, and each one ends in some sort of artifact, right? It's fine design, you know. There's not a lot of branching choices. Fine. So we've done 2/3 of the adventure. Like, I don't regret running this adventure, and I'm actually glad for, like, how compact and straightforward it is for the most part. Yes, there's a bunch of stuff that's like, well, there's a combat for no reason, and there's a bunch of things that are, like, next to each other that don't make any sense. All right, that's fine. You know, that's something that you accept it for the work it is of its time, and then you can either adapt it, as I have often done, or twist the encounters from being combat encounters to being role-play encounters, which I have often done in each and every case here so far. Alright, Emperor Riptide, I mean, Tea Party is a pretty good pun, but, like, who's the professional comedian here? TPK party. A TPK party. Mm. So, where are we at? Where are we at? We've got one spur of the adventure left. We've got two of them behind us. So, what does that mean? The important thing is we've explored 2/3 of the dungeon. Those rooms are dispensed. They're done with, right? Then we're not going to go back to. We're not going to have to go back to those areas and re-explore them or recapture them or whatever. And we did that sometimes in Sunless Citadel, right? Which is a little more dynamic, and they'd explored one way and then they had to go back around that way, and it was very much like let's complete the map. But they've basically completed the map. I suppose they could go down the Two Angels corridor and explore that. That's fine. We've got about 2 sessions left, is what I'm getting at in this adventure. Emperor Riptide asks, with all the loot at the end, do they have to have someone identified, or do they have to go back to do that? I believe they can just sort of attune to it, and they'll learn the powers, right? I don't know. I haven't decided whether I want to make them identify this stuff. Like, the Trident will definitely communicate with them. Now, that's another role-playing encounter that we have to account for when we're prepping next week, is that Wave is going to start talking to them. Okay, well, what does that look like? We also have this whole thing that was sort of set up, like the time of champions has come, and this is the Guardian, and these are the tools that were left behind when Hargat ascended, whatever that means, left this place. Okay, great. So there's some loose ends there that we need to account for. That at the beginning of the session, they're going to. Avril's going to come back. She's seen the session, so she's going to know basically what happened. And then she's going to be like, "What's all this loot? What do we have? What's it for? What does it do?" So we have to put some time into that, and that means we have to include a role-playing encounter for when when they pick up that Trident. Better have some ideas what that thing has to say, what it knows, how it functions. There's the canonical way that it functions, and then there's whatever I decide as the DM. I could decide as the DM it only remembers things, for 10 years at a time, 20 years at a time. That's been down there longer, so it doesn't remember. I'm lost in the darkness. I don't remember. It's a little cheesy to play that card 2 sessions in a row, where you have the old man paladin who doesn't have a great memory, and then you have the artifact that doesn't have great memory. So you got to be careful with that, right? Be careful about repeating your handy excuses and themes to get you out. Yes, there's the canonical way, and then there's the Lommel way. Very good. James V says, I think maybe Wave should only talk to one person, but not Amy. She has enough voices to listen to. Yeah. This plant needs some attention? It's doing okay. It's doing okay. Those are my wife's plants. That's not my responsibility. All right. So let's talk about some loose ends that we've got going on, right? The 2 big ones that we need to address. There's 2 that we sort of. How do we rank these? All right, let's just throw them out there, and then we'll kind of figure out together how we rank them. So 3 big things that need to be addressed, right? Within the context of in the next 2 or 3 sessions, we need to have grappled with these story elements, these plot hooks, these things that are on our plot radar, and have found ourselves at an acceptable understanding or solution to them, right? And those 3 things are: 1, we've got to get Del out of the book, right? We have a prophecy that says, seek the silent whistle until the whippoorwill sings, you won't ever be free, blah, 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 all right? So we need to attack that. And we've got one spur of the dungeon left to do it. So we better frickin' figure that out. That's one thing. Secondly, we need to... These are all sort of... the next two things are implications of Bargad's wishes that were inflicted, right? And so we need to deal with, probably in the next 2 or 3 sessions, we need to deal with Thon's father coming back from the dead and what that means. So that needs to happen. And then finally, the third thing that I think that we need to deal with is the issue of Amy's voices, because it's starting to become such a point of friction between her and the party members. Like, they got into some serious fights last night, and UPS guy is here. Is he here, or is he not here? And where's my landscapers, guys? It's Thursday. Where's my landscapers? Anyway, so we need to come to some sort of understanding or resolution to Amy's voices. And then the fourth thing that we need to address, which is sort of like a fourth major element, which is hanging out there, is like, how does the Iron Keep work? How does it function? What does it have a use beyond this? There's 8 other doors that they have not tackled, etc. Right? So let's keep that in mind, is that the mystery of the Iron Keep is also one of the elements that we need to move towards a resolution on. Doesn't mean we have to solve it in the next 2 or 3 sessions, but we need to bring it to the foreground and have them actively working on ways for them to understand and or manipulate it, right? So, in terms of the first thing, James V raises the question, if they find a way to get Dell out of the book without placing someone else in there to replace her, won't we need to plan for them to remove Eldrick from the book as well? I did not bring that up with them last night, but this raises the amazing possibility that Eldrick's sacrifice was only short term. That he gets to come back and join the rest of the world and maybe seek out his his descendants or relatives or what have you, and could actually, be an NPC who could come back on occasion. So I do think we need to think about, this thing might be a way to destroy the book, or release everyone who's inside the book. Now, if you stop for a moment and think about that sentence, it's a way to release everyone in the book. Maybe there's more than 2 people in the book. Maybe it's more than Dell and Eldrick. Maybe there's a bunch more people in the book. And what would happen if we let all of them loose? And how could that be interesting? And what could we do with, as Thomas W. D. Young points out, who else is in there? Yes. BSB Care says, if I were a PC, I'd be thinking of a way to exchange Dell for Gingy with the book. Yes, that would be great too. I like that idea as well. So we have some fascinating possibilities with the book. I don't know that we need to decide on one particular solution, outcome that we like. What else is in the book is a great question. What if the Tarrasque comes out of that book? Now, some of it is, why haven't we seen some of these people, right? Like, they've flipped through the book and it's just been a bird book. Now, my excuse for them not seeing Sir Eldrick was, he's not in frame all the time. Like, he likes to be on the other side of the tree. He doesn't like to be facing the page side of the tree. right? For whatever reason. So he was hidden. Another excuse could be he climbs that tree all the time. So maybe he made himself a tree house up in the top of the tree, and he lived up there. So he wasn't in frame. So if we have other stuff that's in the book, then we have to kind of have an excuse like, well, why didn't we see it? Because when you flip through the book now, you always see Del, you saw Avril right away, etc. So that is one of those, plausibility concerns that you need to address. Maybe you saw a bear in there. That would have been a great retcon. Well, now you remember seeing a bear. Oh, so great. Yeah. So there's that. All right. So we need to deal with Del. We need to deal with. I look at the three things that are remaining, and I look at Thawne's dad, and I look at the way that the Iron Keep functions, and I'm less worried about those elements because they're not as high a priority as I think the third one is, which is Del's voices. I think the real solution here, let's just pause for a moment and reflect on the heart of the conflict. The heart of the conflict is that Del is in touch with infernal, possibly malevolent forces. And certainly the rest of the party believes that these forces are not honorable, do not intend to faithfully execute any bargain made with them, and in fact are simply there to entice her to commit acts of evil. Right? So that's one issue. That's the one side of the conflict, is that they're concerned that she is being swayed by forces of evil, and they don't want to see her turn to evil. I think if you were to boil that conflict, or boil that perspective down, they don't want Del to commit evil acts. They don't want her swayed to the dark side, however you want to position that. Okay? Oh, I'm sorry, not Del. Tack. Yeah, Tack. Del, Tack. I mean, I think Del had some voices too, but yeah, they don't want Tack to be swayed by all this stuff. Okay. The flip side of this argument, Tack's side of this whole thing, is that she's been hearing these voices and they have been promising her power, and she thinks she can make some sort of bargain with them, safely make some sort of arrangement with them to gain more power and to use it for good acts. So she's sort of placing her chips on, don't worry, I've got this, I can control what I do, and I can use these forces of evil to actually do things that are good, right? And that's in keeping, all the way back to Session 0, where she channeled, these voices to save the village. It's, it's kind of a, deal with the devil kind of perspective, but I think from her point of view, it's worked out. She can do more good, taking advantage, exploiting these voices that come to her, than if she were to turn them away and shut them out. I think, there's a certain character concept there where if she abandons the voices, she won't ever get more power. She'll just stay where she is. Okay? So there's that. The other element here that we need to acknowledge is a metagame element, which is Amy deliberately and initially built her character as a warlock. She wanted to play a warlock. So she wanted to play a character that had some sort of connection to an infernal patron, greater dark power, etc. Right? So to ask her to abandon the voices is asking her to abandon her character concept. It doesn't fly. I mean, that's a tough ask, right? As the DM and from the rest of your party members, like, it feels a little bit like you're not playing your character right. Now, there are times where that's appropriate. You know, if somebody has decided that their character is some sort of sadist and commits all of these horrible acts and whatnot, and the rest of the party is not comfortable with that, it's 100% appropriate to pull that player aside and say, let's have a talk about how we can make this character concept different and more acceptable to the play style of the rest of the group, or unfortunately you have to find a different group because you're so far off of what's going on that there's not, it's just not going to work out, right? And that's fine. You should, if you have to have those conversations, by all means have those conversations. Those situations arise. I don't think this is one of those situations. I don't think I thought about having a conversation with Amy on the side about where she sees this going. I might still do that. That's fine, just to get more clarification on like where she wants this to go. And as James B points out, Tack is like admitting to like manipulating the party and whatnot. So that's that would be another reason to ask her, like, okay, well, you started to admit some stuff that maybe would make the party not trust you, and I'm not sure how that's going to play out. Is that a path that you want to pursue? And I sort of gave her the out to like abandon the voices, and she's not interested in that, which is fine. For the reasons we've discussed, that makes sense. And in fact, she was offered the chance to like find herself deeper in league with them, and she decided to do so this past session, right? Okay, so that's the situation as it stands. As BSB Care says, that's the conundrum as it has been laid out. I don't know that, here's the thing. I don't think the moral test that the party kind of has been setting before her is one that she's going to pass. They're bad for you. You just need to see what happens when you stand up to them, and you'll be even more powerful if you reject them. Is not clearly an argument that's not working on her, right? She was given the chance in this session to openly reject the offers of these infernal forces, and instead she embraced the offers. Like, didn't just like ponder it and go, let me get back to you, but was like, yes, I want more power. Okay. So, how do we solve this? My take on this situation is that it's not an issue of Amy's character being in league with dark forces. If you look at the fundamental nature of the conflict here, it is not about the source of her power. Everybody, especially even at the end of that last combat, can recognize that the power that she wields is useful to the party and can be used to do good. I also think on a metagame level, people like think of her as a mystic and don't think of her as a warlock, and I think it would be useful to remind everybody, like, she's modeled on a warlock style of character, even if her powers are supposed to evince themselves sort of psionically, right? So, it's not a matter of, oh, she's using evil power and that's going to come back and have nasty repercussions for her. That's not the issue. I think the issue is the party, their fundamental worry is that she will be controlled, she will become a servant to these dark forces, right? So it's not so much what is the power that you're exerting and how are you deploying it, because those things are not really in question. Clearly she has some potent abilities. Yeah, if they come from her weird spooky puppet things, that's fine for the most part. It's the weird spooky puppet things and the fact that they seem to be seducing her. That seems to be the source of contention here. So it's really a matter of not the power and not the ends to which it's used, but the control, who has control of it, right? Yes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, absolutely. But let's keep in mind that we're playing a game that actually has, like, a set of heavens and a set of hell, and devils are real, and angels are real, and there's magical compulsion and all that kind of stuff, right? So if we take it as given that it's not about the power, and it's not about her intentions, because I think the party believes she wants to do good in the world. If they didn't believe that, like, it would be a lost cause at this point. They would have attacked her, right? It's really the issue of who's in control. So I think, well, the final result of this long sort of dissection of what's going on is that it's a matter of control, and if we can give TAC a definitive and reassuring means of control, then I think the party will be much more accepting of her ability to engage and wield this power, right? She will not so much fall from grace, but rather saunter vaguely downwards. I mean, I think if we give her some sort of magical item or magical MacGuffin or magical ritual or magical bond that reverses the role that's been established, where it's patron and then TAC is the, is the supplicant who's begging for power, and we reverse it so that she is in control and can channel the creatures in a way that she wants, then I think all of this intra-party conflict, all of these loggerheads start to disappear. That stuff goes away. Now, that's something we have to address in the next, I would say in the next session. It needs to become clear how she can do that. I think the fact that we know that Black Razor is awaiting us at the next end of the spur is interesting. I think I guess one way that I would look at it is if you watched the Doctor Strange movie, right? That was a really compelling thing where he goes and deals directly with the creature that's destroying the world and strikes a bargain with it and ultimately, like, exerts control over it. So I think it's an appealing idea. It's a common trope, but we need to reinforce the part where she has the power that protects her from these things. And maybe there could be some splash damage or whatever it is. But I think she needs to assert dominance over these voices and prove to the rest of the party that she has the dominant hand here. She can protect them, she can protect herself, and she will not slide down the slippery slope, as it were. So, and I think it could be an interesting flip where they come from being like her toys that she talks to and that she asks for information to essentially sort of pets that she has that she can summon and invoke and force to do things. So, Emperor Riptide says maybe you could trade voices for people from the book and channel them through it so the birds become a way to identify the voices. So yeah, there's a really interesting idea there that maybe the voices are creatures or people in the book. That might also explain why Avril got sucked into the book. She freed two voices, somebody had to go in. That also implies that there's a second person who got sucked in there who they haven't seen. That really gets us focused back on, like, that aligns two of our issues, both Dell and Tax voices. That aligns both of them back towards the book. So yeah, that is a terrific suggestion, Emperor Riptide. Thank you for bringing that up. Thomas W.D. Young says maybe you could have some encounter where she fights a manifestation of the voices for dominance. So it could be that the final scenario here is that they need to go into the book. Like, maybe I described to Jordan that, like, the entry for one of these things is essentially like a 10-foot by 10-foot little cube that's, dressed in, like, it has an apple tree and it has some bushes and it's there for the purpose of illustration. But you can't ever really go beyond that area. Maybe Black Razor can slice through the barrier between the pages. And every time you slice through one of those barriers, every time you slice through one of those barriers, it burns a page in the book or something like that. Yes, another pocket dimension, as James V points out. So I haven't watched Lost, but yeah, maybe Avril has some information, as BSB Care says. Yeah, that would be interesting too. So the nice thing about that is that it gives us an additional session to go someplace, right? They could adventure through the book, and you could have not necessarily just like a pocket dimension, but you could have almost this wilderness sort of sandbox adventure where they kind of explore their way through the book. I like that idea a lot. That's a really good suggestion, so thank you. I will ponder it more. My one hesitation about it, in the way that we've been discussing it, is that I expect the Iron Keep to be a set of different sort of pocket dimensions, or at least connected to different planes and things like that. And although that's very on brand for Thawne's character and really ties things together in that respect, I think we might be getting a little bit too much into pocket, too many pocket dimensions. But that's okay. I don't know, it's something to consider. I really like that idea, and it does bring the book forward as this weird kind of its own almost artifact level kind of adventuring locale. It's a very good suggestion. In terms of things that are approaching with Thawne's dad being back, I don't see that as a huge deal. I don't see that as being... I see that as like sort of distant on our plot radar. I don't think that's going to come up in the next 2 to 3 sessions. Guys, I made 60. And I don't think we have to solve the way the Iron Keep works or start hinting at that too much. Although, we've talked about these items like Whelm and Black Razor and Wave as being keys to different parts of the keep. If that's the case, then once they start talking to Wave, we better have an idea of what the implication is there, like what Wave would know, and what Wave can convey about that situation. The final piece of the puzzle that I want to talk about Oh, so James B points out, what if the book is a door into the Iron Keep's pocket dimensions, and it is the dungeons of the Iron Keep where prisoners are kept? Oh! It's very interesting. What if you fight what if Black Razor is the key and you fight your way through the various cells of the quote unquote dungeon, and when you come out, you walk up a set of steps and you lift the heavy wooden door above you, the cellar door, and you emerge into the court of the Iron Keep. Yeah, so the book is the prison area for the Iron Keep. Yeah, pretty cool. That's a very interesting idea. The final thing that I want to make sure that we like kind of tag onto our plot radar here, even though I haven't been keeping my plot radar. I had a bunch of stuff kind of come up at the last minute before I started the stream. We need to think about what the story is with Hargat and Bargad's child. We've indicated there's a dwarven boy or young man who was lost in some tragic way. What does that mean? How does all of this fit into the previous elements that we have laid out, right? So, so that's something to that's an element that we can interweave into this whole thing and explain. Now, it's possible that whoever this character is not dead. What if the kid is in the book? What? Miracle. That's not really appropriate. I lost cash too. BSB Care wagered big. So, that might tie all of those things together. There's some great ideas. All right. The final thing I want to tag on here, and I know I got a lot of final things, but I just want to point out, why is this called Loose Ends and Umbrellas? Obviously, here's why. We can see why it's called Loose Ends. We've been picking them up for the past 25 minutes. Why is this called Loose Ends and Umbrellas? Because I consider the adventure arc to be like an umbrella, and you open it up and you create a bunch of different paths, and then at some point, as you can see the end of your material approaching, you have to close it back up and move on to the next adventure or whatever. You can't just keep creating new threads upon new threads upon new threads, or you have so many outstanding hanging loose ends that the players are like, well, I guess we're pursuing this thing, but whatever happened to that? Why did we leave that behind? And maybe, yes, that's more like real life where you do that. I would argue that's not honestly true. I don't think people lead lives where they're offered multiple opportunities to pursue things and they pick one and then they do it, and then they're offered again multiple opportunities to do things and they pick one and they do it, and they're offered multiple opportunities. Like, yes, you can look back on your life as, I could have taken this path, I could have taken this path, but you don't look back on your life and go, well, I could have explored these 4 things a year ago, and then, right? It's all good, you guys. I just, that kind of language. We certainly have people in the chat who would be sensitive to that. So I would ask you, for their benefit, if that's kind of your slang and lingo, just dial it back. That's all. Let's have some consideration, please, for people who don't consider that language to be a casual doesn't mean anything kind of experience. So, I get how you sling it around. Reflect for a moment. So that's why I call it loose ends and umbrellas, because at this point we're working on closing the umbrella, and that's what all of these things are about. Like, how do we how do we pull it together and pull it closed? So that's the buzz there. That's the buzz there. Mirakel, I hope you're back in the channel here. Please go ahead and give us a little shout out there. I think we did some. I got there was a little hiccup there in some of the moderating we were trying to do. So, all right, that is the Buzzaloony. So, end of the day, I thought it was a fantastic session. Jordan did such a great job. I was so proud of him, and also. All of the little story bits that I planted, all of those Schrodinger's reveals that were put in there came out and came to fruition, and all the stuff that we planted in with chat also came out and came out to fruition. And I really thought it made for such an interesting and dramatic session, and it really was one of, we've had a series of some terrific games. But especially when you run a one-shot, and you got to, it's kind of a stunt casting type of situation for this very special episode. Here's what's going to happen, and I think it paid off in a very satisfactory way here. So, sure, there are some refined DM tricks that I pulled in order to lay the groundwork for that. But I do have to give huge props to the cast for being the great players that they are, right? For seeing those opportunities for what they were and for taking advantage of them. You can lay that stuff out there, and we could have had a whole role-playing scene where it's like, well, I'm not going back in there. I didn't have to. I'd never told Jordan that a noble sacrifice was on the table. That's where having awesome players is really rewarding for me as a DM. Is I put it out there for chat to activate, but the only thing that was available, there was never they didn't know it was there. It was never expressly stated. They didn't know it was part of the reward lineup, and the way it was presented to them, as I didn't say anything about a sacrifice, I just said there's this apple, and you remember that that's how people get into the book. And he saw that for what it was and stepped up. So, yeah, I'm proud of the way that I ran the game, and I'm happy that some of the seeds that I laid bore fruit, but a lot of that is really the result of having a very savvy and terrific and talented cast. And I'm really grateful that Dom has put this group of players together for me so that we could all jointly go off on an adventure together. So there we go. Yeah, Eric stepped up. Even Garav's character stepped up. It'll be interesting. You'd think if anybody, Avril was going to really be barking at Tack about some of this stuff. And I think that's what makes controlling the voices even more important, right? That's gonna be clutch. All right, so there you go. That's the buzz. That's going to bring us to the end of Disorganized Play today. I want to thank everybody for joining me. Your ideas today were invaluable, and I think we will explore them in further detail on Tuesday when I come back and we have our prep session. In a lot of ways, this felt like a prep session, but I think one of the things that happens as we get closer to the end of an adventure, your recap sessions, because those elements are starting to collapse and you're starting to get, everything sort of focused in on, here's the things on our plot radar that we need to address and wipe off the board. Your recap sessions tend to turn into prep sessions, because you start going, all right, we took care of that, we took care of that, we took care of that. Well, what did we take care of this time? They learned some more about the book, they learned some more about Gingy, and then they got anointed as, the champions or whatever. But they didn't learn a ton more about Hargat or Bargad. There was a ton more learned about Amy's voices, but it needs to be or not a ton more, but some more learned about Amy's voices, and it needs to be brought back into focus, right? So your recap sessions, as you kind of get towards the end of an adventure, need to kind of come to, okay, in order for me to do good prep, I need to start zinging these things, bam, 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 like lining up my ducks and starting to knock them off. So maybe we're all in the book. Yes, chat is the book, and Avril was watching things through the book the whole time. Avril has been an advocate for TAC, but Avril is also like the big sister, like tough love person, right? So she's certainly willing to like take TAC to task for some of this stuff. But I think she'll also defend TAC. I love you. It always starts with, I love you, but, and then bam, bam, bam. So it'll be interesting to have her come back. I think one of the things that we need to plan for on Tuesday is that there's going to be a moral dilemma, like that this conflict may come to a head when Avril comes back and finds out what's been going on. And especially if she gets, especially if she tries to pin down TAC and gets TAC to either admit something like she did last time, or gets TAC to lie or mind control somebody, lie to the party or mind control somebody in the party. That could turn ugly quickly. Our ace in the hole here is we have an NPC right there who might be able to redirect or offer a way out, right? Which is Wave. Wave is an intelligent artifact and may be able to shed light on a solution or offer a solution and redirect attention back to the book. So, it'd be interesting if TAC could take the book and use it to control the voices. All right, very good. Lots of good, great stuff to ponder here. I appreciate you all spending time with me. Let's take a look at the calendar, figure out what else is up. So tonight, Mr. DJ David Crennan, everybody's a DJ at Saving Throw. I don't know if you knew that, but that's a prerequisite for hosting a show on Saving Throw, is you must need mad DJ skills. Tonight, DJ David Crennan, America's Dungeon Master, is going to be running Star Wars Edge of the Empire. Never tell me the odds. I believe this is a one-off session tonight. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that's the buzz that I saw going around. Friday night at 8 o'clock, it's an all-new season of Wild Cards with Jordan Caves Callerman and a bunch of our other Saving Throw regulars. Should be an exciting time. I'm looking forward to Wild Cards coming back. I am curious what Jordan has in store. Everyone seems to be a little bit kind of like, recovering from Gen Con, but also like infused with enthusiasm and refreshed with new energy for the games that they're running and whatnot. So I'm eager to see how that will be reflected in Friday night's events. If you are in the Los Angeles area and would like to see me perform live, Saturday night I will be sitting in with the Bearded Men West, not doing the Dungeons and Dragons show, but I will be doing a show called Epic Narrative, where basically we get an object and we do a scene paint, and then it all unfolds from there. So it will be. I'm curious to see how it plays out. But I will be there. It's Saturday night in Los Feliz at the Impro Studio Theater. and I believe it starts at 10:30. I know that there's a show or two before that, and Impro does really good stuff. And narrative improv, if you haven't seen it, I think can be some really terrific, compelling improv, very fun and rewarding, and more so, in my opinion, than badly done long form improv, which is kind of like lazy improv. And trust me, I've done a lot of long form improv, and I've done a lot of it very lazily, so I know whereof I speak. It's not like Whose Line Is It Anyway, because with Whose Line they generally play a bunch of games, and there's usually some sort of rule or restriction. You know, you can't repeat the same letter of the alphabet, right? Or there's some sort of short form game going on. If you pause, then you have to tag out and somebody else can tag in. Or somebody yells freeze and they come in and replace you in the scene, and we start a whole new scene using the last line that was spoken. Those things are all, like, that's short form. I've done some short form, and it's fun. It's super great to jump in and watch those things play out. And I love Whose Line, and I love the performers on Whose Line. They're terrific. You know, Wayne Brady is brilliant, and Colin Mockery and Ryan Stiles. Those people are so super talented. But it's a specific type of improv, which I haven't performed lately. Yeah, I mean, you have restrictions in terms of there are certain rules to the game that you're playing, and when you start to stray outside those rules, then they may disqualify you or not award you points or whatever, right? But it's got a rule structure that the audience is told about and that they understand, so that they can enjoy it and they can see the improv challenge that's being worked through. And also so that they can understand the pattern or apply the pattern that's being set on top of the improv form, right? Don't make me go off on a dissertation about long form, short form. But this is going to be more narrative. So I think it's going to be like we get an object, and it might be, you know, an engagement ring, and then we might paint a scene around that engagement ring. Okay, well, we are in the lost and found. We see the lost and found box at a library in a Midwestern town, and the windows show the sunlight glistening off of the cold blue snow outside, etc., 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 and then we start a scene from there. Okay, well, now we know a whole bunch. We started with this one simple object. We know that we're in a public place. We know that an engagement ring has been lost. There's a relationship implied by that. There's probably a librarian there. Yeah, so drama class improv, yeah, maybe so. I don't know what kind of drama class you took, but I will be doing that. You know, who knows whether it'll be funny or interesting or sad or compelling or what it'll be. I haven't played in this particular form yet, so I'm curious to see how it goes. It'll be fun, but they invited me to do that. And also, I believe I can announce at this time, starting in September, we will be doing like a 10-week run of the Dungeons & Dragons show, and I will be DMing for most all of those, except for, I think, one weekend when I end up going to Big Bad Con up in Oakland. So I want you to, if you're planning to be in the LA area, book out for Saturday nights, or try and find a Saturday night to. You live in Los Angeles. Well, come see us at the Impro Studio Theater in Los Feliz. I will be doing DMing the Dungeons & Dragons show, and we took some photos for it, and I'm excited to be doing a long run with them live. I love the live show. It's super fun. It's a great opportunity, and I just the give and take with the live audience there is amazing, and you don't get in a Twitch format the same way. So, yes, Jordan, please come see that. That'll be super fun. You know, it's possible if you wanted to guest, we could figure out a way to have you fill in as an NPC or something like that. So let me know if you wanted to come and watch and or possibly play along. So for those of you who can't come and see it live, I don't know. Impro Studio is doing some stuff where they stream this stuff on Facebook Live sometimes. They might do a Twitch stream, but I would guess it would probably be on their Facebook page. It's not obviously the same quality as what they do at Geek and Sundry, where we have dedicated camera operators and we have somebody switching between multiple cameras and everybody's individually mic'd as opposed to having a hanging group mic and all of those sorts of, like, there's just a higher level of quality at GNS than what they can do inside they're a large, they're a live studio theater, right? So they're about the experience, the live experience, and not so much about the streaming. They're trying to do more streaming because they want to build their audience. So you may be able to see it on their Facebook Live page. I will tweet about it if you can, wherever it is. I want to set expectations that it's not going to be the cut, walk into angles and that sort of thing. That's the other part of it, is like at Geek and Sundry, we knew there's a camera right there. I can walk in and do a close-up. I can be in the shot. I can come out of the shot. I can come up into the shot, come out of the shot, all that sort of stuff, right? So that's the dealio with that experience. It's going to be a different product than what you would see on Geek and Sundry. But Geek and Sundry, for the most part, doesn't have a live audience either, right? It's the chat is the live audience, but they don't have anybody in the studio other than the rest of the crew and maybe a guest or two. So those are those different cross purposes. That's what's going on. Hey, that is our time together. I hope you guys tune in for Star Wars tonight or Wild Cards tomorrow. You got the weekend to go back and watch the last session of White Plume Mountain, revel in the glory that took place. And until then, I hope to see you again Tuesday, of course. But if not, well, hey, let's dungeon. Oh, BSB Care, how many in a row? What am I up to? I believe I'm over 400 now. 402 for 402. Yes!